Hey gang, Tim here. I'll talk if you'll listen, episode 63. The journey to 70 is the next milestone, and we're on the roll, everybody. This is going to be a big year. Every time I get behind a mic this year, I can't help but to think of 2018 and 2019 and how little I recorded. And again, I'm not living in the past in a negative way. I'm building inspiration off of it. I talked about this before, where you can take a look at yourself in the past and go, man, if only I had done this, man, if only I had done that. And you can find yourself living in the past and thinking about, Tom Brady, and he's been to 10 Super Bowls, won 7, and tonight I'm sure he wasn't thinking about those 3 that he went to and lost in, and thinking, hey, oh man, I should have did this, I should have did that. And I'm trying to be the same way, thinking about those years, not necessarily in a negative way, but drawing inspiration off of those years. And I think about some of the great things that happened, and I look at it as, yeah, I did not record maybe quite as much as I wanted to, but I still did it. And everything I've done in 2018 and 2019 in particular helped me get to episode 63. So I'm just appreciating the journey. Who knows where this might go? This may never ever take off. I think a lot of the times, my generation in particular, we get into sports, we get into entertainment, we get into music, we get into so many different things. And one con to having people to look up to is you instinctively compare yourselves to that. You compare yourself to that person's success, and you go, oh, you hear these things like anything is possible. And yeah, that's true. But it's also important to be realistic in understanding that sometimes the stars got to align, or you got to just be in the right place at the right time or know the right people in order for things to happen. And that doesn't always happen. I remember hearing this one interview, I wish I could remember what it was, where it was like the greatest rapper alive is probably at Walmart, like stocking the produce section right now. And we would never know. Just because, yeah, things that are on his plate or her plate, yeah, they never dedicated the studio time. Yeah, they never went online and tried to find, an A&R or somebody who maybe would give them the time of day. Yeah, they maybe never went to shows. Yeah, maybe they never put a website together. It's a lot of things they didn't do. But some people can do all of that, and just not have it happen for them. And I remember in particular, not to go too far down the rabbit hole, somebody telling me that, hey, it only takes one person. All it takes is one person to hear your podcast. All it takes is for one person to hear your radio show. All it takes is for one person to see that one YouTube video that you put up, and you could take off. That's all it takes. So that's both inspirational and at the same time scary, in the sense that, hey, you got millions of opportunities and none of them could be the right one. And I'm trying my very best. I've read a ton of articles, books, and quotes that have tried to drill this lesson into many people like me, especially in my age group, of just enjoy the moment. I'm just enjoying the moment. I'm living in the moment. And right now I'm in episode 63. And although I do have goals and aspirations, I'm just enjoying episode 63, y'all. Who knows where this might go? Who knows where this might end up? Who knows who I'll have on? Who knows? And I'm just really excited to enjoy this as an opportunity, especially during today's times, to talk to everybody, to be social. I was talking to my girlfriend earlier today about how, or maybe it was yesterday, about how gamers, out of everyone in this pandemic, gamers are in the minority of lacking social interaction, because we have avenues like Twitch, YouTube gaming, etc., where we can interact with people on a regular basis, routinely. And we have our friends list, even if we're not streaming online, but we're getting online, and whether it's a mainstream game like Call of Duty or Madden, or whether it's something a little more niche like Sid Meier's Civilization. We can get on and we can play with our friends and family, and even in some cases, complete strangers, and we can still click that social button, so to speak, And I think entertainers are very much in the same boat. If you are, a YouTuber, if you're a creator, if you are a podcaster, if you have a radio show, if you have a live show, if you're privileged or blessed or lucky enough, or you've worked hard enough to be on a team sport or to be on a national network and talk about sports or news or other entertainment, you have the opportunity to be social. And I think a lot of the times we look at these different avenues and mediums and we go, there are a lot of people like that. No matter how many people there are in the entertainment industry, no matter how many people there are in the who are videographers or photographers or whatever, authors, creators, there are still more people who exist who aren't. And I think a lot of the times we take certain things for granted. So I'm trying my very, very best not to take this for granted. There are some people who work virtually, but there are others who don't. There are others. A good friend of mine has to go in to his job every day and speak with people. Think about, I'm on the East Coast, the Philadelphia area in particular. So we have a local, I guess the best way to put it is kind of like a convenience store chain called Wawa. And, there are people who have to go into Wawas. There are people who have to go into Burger Kings and Walgreens and CVS's all across the country who have the opportunity to be social on some level. So there's always a silver lining to look at things, and that's actually a good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you all about, and that's casual fandom in specific areas. I'm going to talk about football and the Super Bowl in particular, but it kind of reminds me the best way for those of you who are not into sports. It kind of reminds me of that little anime that no one knows about, that you're really, really big on, or that underground rapper or artist or singer that you're really, really into. You go to all of their indie shows, you got your indie playlist going on your streaming service, and you're just listening to them. And all it takes is that one opportunity, right, that we talked about earlier, that they make it big now. Now they are on their third or fourth or fifth album, and everybody loves them. And it's that one person who was listening to them when they were a no name, going, "Oh, this person is mine." Now they're everybody else's. These are all fake fans because they weren't around when I was around, and all these different things. And I sometimes feel that way about football in general. I never feel that about my football team. I never feel that way about the Eagles in particular. But I do feel that way about football sometimes, where I feel selfish, like this thing is mine. And unless you're a football fan, you don't have a right to be entertained by it. But that only happened. I only feel that way about 15 to 20% of the time. I thought about it today, and let me tell you where this thought came from, and I want you to compare it to maybe that rapper, singer, anime, show, whatever, that you can relate to if you can't relate to the sports aspect. But I'm a huge football fan, and I'll always say to anybody, especially my good friend Ryan, that I'm a football fan before I'm an Eagles fan. And because I'm a football fan, and more importantly, I'm a sports fan. And I think all of those things trickle into the next thing. I'm a huge sports fan. I love the entertainment. I love the competitive nature. I love the teamwork. I love the effort. I love the strategy. Everything about sports. I love sports so much that you could tell me about a sport that I did not know existed today, and I could broadcast for it. Because there are certain things about sports that I think are just universal, and they're so great for the human species. And it's just dope. That compounds on football. I'm a football fan. It's in my blood. I love football. I played Little League football when I was younger. If I had gone to college with a football program, despite my size and my frame and my height, I still would have tried out, or maybe have tried to be involved in some way, shape, or form. To this day, I still have maybe an unrealistic dream of being a football coach in some capacity. Maybe not quite the NFL level, but I would love to be a football coach, because I love to coach and strategize and train and inspire people and lead. I love to do all these different things, and I think football is a great way, sports in general, but football, and in particular, coaching football, is a great way to do that. And finally, I'm an Eagles fan, which you take the sports fan, the football fan, and it just adds to the Eagles fan. I love the logo. I love the Kelly green. I love the midnight green. I love the all black. I love the vet. I love Lincoln Financial Field. I love the players. I love the history. I love being angry with them. I love everything about it. And um I can turn on a football game, Eagles or otherwise, and truly appreciate the nuances of the way a play was drawn up, or why a certain defense plays a certain coverage, why having your starting left guard switch to left tackle is such a huge deal, and appreciate certain things, and can appreciate a low scoring game that ends in like a 9-3. All of those different things I can enjoy because I love the sport so much. So when you take somebody who's so passionate about something and you take a casual fan and you put them next to that person, there's two sides of the same coin. The first side is, oh, great, I'm giving you exposure to this thing that I like so much. And although you may not like it as much as I do, you have the opportunity to learn about it, to be a part of it, to experience it, and at the very least, at least get a glimpse of what matters so much to me, what makes me who I am. I believe that football is a part of who I am as a person. And I could literally say that football is Tim. A portion of football is Tim. A portion of Tim is football. And when you have a casual fan or someone who doesn't care as much about it next to you watching, regardless of the capacity, it can feel a little great. It can feel a little motivating. It's kind of like that. I compare it to Game of Thrones, a Game of Thrones story, where a coworker of mine was shocked that I didn't watch Game of Thrones and was always on my back about watching it. And I remember when I started it, I went to work the next week and told him, like, hey, I started it. And he was really excited. In fact, he was so excited that he was eager to talk to me about it every day, or at least a couple times a week. And in fact, he started to rewatch it just because. So that let me know that, hey, if someone is interested even a little bit in something that you're so passionate about, it can really light a fire up underneath you. But here's the other side of it. A part of you gets a little selfish and a little insecure, where you're like, this thing is mine. You don't like it as much as I do. You're not going to take care of it like I will. You're not going to appreciate it like I will. You're not invested. You're only watching this for the commercials. You're in your phone during the plays. You're not jumping and screaming and cheering and cursing like I am. So if you're not going to check any of those boxes, don't even watch it with me. Don't sit down. Don't talk to me about it, because you don't know what it's like. And I know that may sound harsh and cruel to some of you, but for the people on here who are thinking of that one thing that they're super passionate about, whether it be something as niche as like model airplanes, or maybe it's fishing, maybe it's bowling, maybe it's your favorite TV show. There are a lot of people in my life who are huge fans of Harry Potter. And if I'm sitting down watching Harry Potter, I'm watching it because it's a movie. It has to do with sorcery and magic, and I like that stuff, and I'm watching it. But I'm not watching it because I read the books. I know all about the author. I know all about the characters. And I'm not watching it because it's a Harry Potter movie. I'm watching it because it's a movie that I might like. And that person who's an uber fan of Harry Potter might go, hey, I think it's cool that you're watching this with me, but I don't want you to go to like a movie premiere with me because you're not going to dress up. You're going to think everybody there is goofy. You're not going to have a wand. You don't even know what your house is. So for everybody out there who maybe can't relate to what I'm saying, try to, if you will, just humor me. Try to think of that one thing that you're passionate about. That if you were not working, if you were not going to school, if you were not listening to this podcast right now, that you would be doing. And to think about somebody who's in your life right now who is not as passionate about that, and they kind of want to participate. Think about, for all my gamers out there, you're sitting down, you want to play a hardcore game. You don't want to play something casual. You want to play something hardcore, and you want to strategize, and you're taking it seriously. And let's say your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or a little brother, little sister, or a parent wants to sit down like, oh, teach me how to play. Just like I mentioned earlier, there's a side of the coin where you're excited because you're like, oh, cool, you want to play? Come on, let's do it. We can spend more time together. This is dope. But there's also another side of you that's like, you're not going to get it. You're not going to like it. You're going to think it's weird. And I kind of say I feel that way every time my girlfriend watches football with me. Because I know for her, it's just an opportunity for her to have something to do. And for her, it's an opportunity to spend time with me. But me as a Eagles fan, part of me appreciates that because when I tell her, like when she wants to do something, she knows not to make plans because the Eagles game is coming on. And I like that she can appreciate that fact. So when she wants to sit down and watch it with me, that's the side of me that appreciates it, that likes it. And maybe one day she'll be as excited about it as I am. But there's another part of me like, she's going to be on her phone. She's not even paying attention. She doesn't even care. She's laughing at some meme when an important play is happening. So she's laughing over like the announcer. And it's like those little things get on my nerves. And it's like, oh my goodness, and you kind of don't want to sit down with somebody like that and watch a game. So I experienced that tonight on a lesser degree with the Super Bowl because I'm a football fan. I'm a fan of sports. But I'm not as entirely invested in the teams playing. Like, I will always love Andy Reid as a person and as a coach for what he did for the city of Philadelphia, in particular the Eagles organization. And he's just a great football coach. Really, really good football coach. And I just really like him as a leader of men. I also appreciate Tom Brady. Maybe not necessarily as I'm not a fan of him. And a lot of that may be a little bitterness and just the level of success that he's had and how unsuccessful my team has been. But I can appreciate him as a competitor. I can say I can learn a lot from him as a competitor. I appreciate his discipline. I appreciate how at 43 years old, he's still got juice left in the tank and he's still fired up. I can appreciate him as no matter how important football is, he still makes time for his family and his kids in particular. I love the fact that he loves his beautiful wife. I love the fact that he is a leader of men. He gets the people around him fired up. And he gets happy for the people around him. And I love his story. This guy, for him to get drafted when he got drafted, I think he got drafted in the 4th round. And for him to have the career that he's had, it's still not done. People who have literally started playing after he have since retired. And to have him still at the game, I can respect that and appreciate that. But as an Eagles fan, not really that invested, but still looking to be entertained. And a part of me almost looks at it as a little disrespectful that the Super Bowl is like this entertainment thing. Like it's not about football. Like on the biggest stage for football, it suddenly isn't about football anymore. It's kind of like really being into like UFC or boxing. And for the biggest fight of the year, everybody is making comments about the commercials or the ring girls or how attractive the fighters are or something like that. And they're not appreciating the technique, the blood, sweat, and tears that the fighters put into it, the beauty of the right hooks or the jabs or submission holds. They're not appreciating any of that. So I kind of feel the same way about football, in particular the Super Bowl, where it's like, this is so important for the sport. But you got people who are literally tuning in for reasons that have nothing to do with the sport. People who literally have it on in the background or don't turn it on at all and then turn it on just to watch the halftime show and turn it off. It makes me a little upset in a way. It bothers me. And that selfish side of me comes out like, no, this is mine. This is mine. This is mine. You can't have it if you can't appreciate it as much as I do. But on the flip side, a part of me is really, really happy that something that is, let's call it, it's not niche, but if you're not into football, you're not going to sit down and watch a football game unless something else can draw you into it. So I really like how innovative the NFL and sponsors can be in increasing hype around a game. And for every person who only watches the halftime or only watches it for the commercials, there might be another person who does decide to sit down and watch the game, or does decide to go to a Super Bowl party. Hopefully this year you didn't go to a Super Bowl party, unless you had one in your house with the people who live in the house. But you get my point. For all of those casual fans out there, if it could potentially introduce them to something new and cool, and they could become a regular fan, that would be dope. And I think that's great for the sport. And I think the sport benefits from it. It generates a lot more money, a lot more revenue. And with that, it can go towards health and safety, better equipment, better health science, better fitness science, all these different things. More games on at a time, maybe cheaper NFL packages because more people are buying, things of that nature. It just, football events, other sporting events, it can make it to be very much more accessible to people who maybe otherwise wouldn't. I remember one time reading something that said that women in general are more interested in people, places, or things that they can connect with. So what people find that is if a woman, I'm generalizing here obviously, but generally speaking, if a woman isn't into something but can connect to that person to a degree, they're more likely to be interested in it. I remember my barber one time told me that he would sit down and watch sports, and his wife would never be into it, but his wife was really into entertainment, celebrities and things like that. And one time he was sitting down watching the game, he said, "You see that guy right there? He just had a daughter with so-and-so." And then she's like, "Oh, really?" And she knows who that is, and she can tie it to, and now she's a little bit interested because she's interested in the person, not the athlete, but the person behind the helmet or behind the jersey, so to speak. So I thought that was interesting. I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, but I'd be really curious to hear what you all think. Do you have that one niche thing, that arts and crafts thing, that radio show, that book, that whatever, that you listen to that you feel like is yours and no one else can have it except for the people who like it as much as you do? Or are you kind of like, hey, no, the more people, the better. Hey, if the more people who listen to my artists, the more people who listen to my rapper, my singers, that means that's more money for them and it's only better for the industry. So tell me how you feel. I'd be really, really, really interested to know. Sound off in the comments below if you're listening on Spreaker or YouTube, or hit me up on social media. I'd love, love, love to hear what you have to say. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to pay some bills, and then we'll be right back with the next topic. Hey, everybody, I'm back. One last thought on the last topic. I remember having a friend who I'm still friends with, good friends to this day, and she introduced me to Kendrick Lamar. And I remember liking him, but like not really feeling him that much. And then like he came out with Good Kid, Mad City, and I fell in love. And then obviously I listened to every other album after that. And then when Damn came out, I was rocking Damn all day. And then I remember she came over one time, I'm playing it, and she's like, "Oh, now you feeling Kendrick Lamar? You didn't like him back then." And a part of me, I can see both sides of the argument. On one end, it's like, no, don't hop on him now while he's big, because now you just seem like you like him because everybody else does. But on the other end, it's like, damn, just because I appreciate him now in 2018, 2017, 2016, 2012, and I didn't back in 2011, 2010, whenever, what does that make me less of a fan? I appreciate him now. Like, what does it matter? Why can't you be happy that I enjoy an artist that you do? So I can see both sides of it, and I think it's just so funny because we've all been on both sides of that. And another way that it applies is in the form of Black history. So I was thinking about Black history in general, and just to go back a bit to a previous episode, a recent track, a single, in fact, by J. Cole called "Snow on a Bluff," where he talks about, for the people who were privileged enough to be educated about certain social topics, they should, like B. Du Bois would say, you're the talented 10th. You need to grab the other 90% and bring us up to your level. Come down to our level and bring us up to yours. Educate us, teach us, give us the opportunity to be informed and enlightened. And a lot of the times, people like that look down their nose at you. So J. Cole rapped about that on a song called Snow on the Bluff, and it was very powerful. I encourage you to listen to it. Because on one end, it's very humbling because he's saying, like, hey, I don't know as much as you do. Help me understand. But on the other end, there's a little defensiveness in there, I think rightfully so, where he's like, don't look down on me just because I don't know as much as you. I look just like you. I sound just like you. We're both black. I'm on your side. Don't alienate the people who you need on your side, especially men. How many of us talked about, I did an episode previously about how black men don't support black women. You need certain people on your side. And sometimes people just don't know how to do that. In that episode in particular, I spoke about what black men can do and I had two lovely guests on the show to elaborate on what black men can do to support black women and what men in general can do to support women. But there are a lot of times, I think a lot of people perceive ignorance with an unwillingness to, and that's not necessarily true. Sometimes people want to help, they just don't know where to get started or how to. And going back to how the previous topic correlates to this one with Black history, Twitter can be such a toxic place, and it's so unfortunate. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. If it wasn't for this show, if it wasn't for you all, I probably wouldn't have one. Although there are some perks, I can be better connected with the people that I care about, or things that I care about, topics that I care about, news that I care about. It can be so toxic. It's such a mob mentality where people feel like they need to pick a side on something. Nobody can just be indifferent. You could literally get on Twitter right now and say LCD TVs are the best. And there's going to be somebody out there that's like, no, OLED TVs are the best, or plasma TVs are the best. No, old tube TVs are the best. And this is why, I don't support the LCD community because Sony doesn't support our environment. And do you not support the environment because you like Sony LCD? I'm like, dude, relax. I'm just saying I don't like LCD TVs, and Twitter is like that. I don't know why. Twitter subconsciously tell all of the users of Twitter that you need to pick a side. I find myself catching myself sometimes where I'll be on Twitter and I see people comment about something, and sometimes I just want to be a contrarian and get on and disagree. And I check myself like, Tim, you really don't care that much. You just want to disagree. And I can pull myself back down to earth. Not too many people can do that. So I go on Twitter and I see so many people going like, I'm unfollowing companies or people or celebrities or whomever that say in celebration of Black History Month, we're going to yada, yada, yada. Or because of Black History Month, we're going to yada, yada, yada. Or, it's a shame why it's messed up that you only celebrate in Black History one month out of the year. There's 11 other months, yada, yada, yada. And on one hand, I can understand that, especially when, for the longest time, when it mattered, especially during the civil rights movement, during situations like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, where people do need, even Colin Kaepernick, where people do need to be aware of social injustice towards the African American community by people outside of that community in particular. I know it's really, really easy to shine a light on the troubles that we got going on in our own backyard, but the injustices that are happening for people who don't live on the property, so to speak, to stay with the analogy, is very troubling. And I can understand how people who've been on the wrong end of that, whether it be physically, emotionally, or mentally, feel like, no, now you want to be a part of the discussion when it's cool, when it's hip, when it's popular. Where were you 5 years ago? Where were you 10 years ago? Where were you in March or April or May? Why did you wait till February? So I can get that piece of it. But on the other end, a part of me is like, well, why can't this company increase awareness? If this company only increases awareness for 28 or 29 days out of a year, well, hey, that's 28 or 29 more days than maybe other companies are doing it. And I know that might not be ideal. And a lot of people, some celebrities, in fact, look down on Black History Month for that very same reason. I say, hey, look, there's a silver lining. Look at the silver lining. It's an opportunity for people who may not have otherwise been exposed to it, the history, the knowledge, the insightfulness. And now they will be. You know, some boy in Texas or California or Wisconsin, even of Hispanic heritage, may gain some new insight. Some white kid in Connecticut may gain some new insight. Some Native American kid in Atlanta may gain new insight. People all over the world may gain new insight. And I think, especially now, being arguably at the peak of the information age, where we have information at our fingertips, now's the best time to increase awareness about Black history, because we have so many mediums. And say what you want about the pandemic, one blessing in disguise is it's created a lot of creators. And my guest that you'll hear later on in the show is an author. And he's been inspired to author more books and more publications. And now that we're in the information age, it's so much, it's way easier to be exposed to things that maybe we wouldn't have been exposed to before. Now, that can be traumatizing in some cases, and more in particular, unfortunately, information isn't biased. Information does not have any feelings. Information can be good or bad. Information serves its own purpose. So, with platforms like Twitter, where it can give anybody a voice, people can get on a platform and spread false information. Or inaccurate information. So that can be dangerous. But for everybody out there who is upset, who is grumpy, who is feeling selfish or insecure, and saying, no, Black history is mine, you can't have it, think about the people who in Black history have done their due diligence to make people aware of their Blackness, to make people aware of our Black culture and heritage. It's really, really important to get the word out. What would you rather have? Black heritage and Black culture only being exposed to Black people? Or would you like to be in a world where more people are aware of the struggles, the challenges, and yes, even the victories that our people have gone through? So I wanted to take the opportunity to say that Black history means so much to so many different people, and in some areas it doesn't mean enough. But for me in particular, and I talked a little bit about this last episode, I like to celebrate it by educating myself. There's so much that I don't know. There's stuff that I know I don't know, but there's stuff that I don't know I don't know. So I try to encourage and inspire my willingness to learn by educating myself on Black men, Black women, Black people who mean a lot to me, whether that be somebody like Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, etc., or whether it be somebody like Mike Tyson or Kevin Hart even. I know a lot of the times where we are at right now, it's tough to see how significant athletes or celebrities or comedians or singers, rappers, entertainers can be important to Black history, but it really, really can. Think about what it does for that Black boy or Black girl who sees that violin, like in the Super Bowl halftime show today. We had a bunch of Black violinists in the weekend's halftime performance. Think about how many little girls or boys that inspired. Think about how many adults looked at that and went, you know what? I want to learn violin now. Because there's somebody who looks and sounds like me who is doing this. So I like to educate myself on some of the contemporaries as well. In my own little weird way, it's me giving them their flowers while they can still smell them. I don't want to look up the Will Smiths, the Dave Chappelles, the LL Cool J's. I don't want to look up these people after they're gone. You know, I think about the reverence we have for Tupac and Biggie and a lot of the other artists that have passed away, the Michael Jacksons, the Princes. And I think about the reverence we speak about them after they have passed. I kind of want to educate myself, or at least appreciate the people who are around now. So that way I'm not just saying empty words when they do eventually pass on. So last week I spoke a lot about Mike Tyson and how he changed my perspective on a lot of different things. And I will never, ever forget his words. This time around, I transitioned to two specific areas. One we're going to talk a little bit about, and the other one we're going to talk about at length. I'm going to pause here before transitioning into how Kevin Hart was the subject of my Black Education series that I've been doing this month. I'm going to take a break, pay some bills, and I'll be back right after this. Hey everybody, welcome back. So, Kevin Hart, say what you want to say about him. At the end of the day, he's still a black man who's accomplished a lot. And that's not sweeping his mistakes underneath the rug. But I think you can't define a person off of one great deed. You can't define them off of one poor deed. And Kevin Hart, especially being from Philadelphia, inspires me in so many ways. One thing that I really envy about him is his work ethic. And I know I am one alarm away, one workout away, one push-up away from being as disciplined as he is. But right now, I will say that that's a struggle for me. That's a challenge for me. There are days when that alarm goes off and I go, I do not feel like getting up. There are days, hell, even tonight, I did not want to get behind this mic and record this episode. I was so tired. But just listening to Kevin Hart this week has been so huge for me. And just to talk a little bit about what I've learned so far, and I'm still continuing to learn more about him, it has a lot to do with his work ethic and his perception of life. And I listened to a few different interviews, read a few different interviews, and just look at some of the things that he's done, especially in the music and in the movie industry. I just admire his work ethic so much, and it's so inspiring to hear somebody who looks and sounds like you and actually is your same height. I'm pretty sure me and Kevin Hart about the same height. So there's another area I can relate to. And who checks all those boxes for you on a relatability scale. And there's one thing in particular that stood out, where he says he tries to just focus on the positivity as much as he can. Well, another area that stood out to me too was how important social interaction is. He talked about how he's grateful for his celebrity, because without his celebrity, he wouldn't be where he is today. But he also talked about how it can be dehumanizing when, he goes in the bathroom and he can't even, use the bathroom in peace because somebody's there waiting to take a picture, or somebody's trying to talk to him and he can't talk because a camera or a phone is shoved in his face. And he talked about how important a handshake in a conversation is. And it really made me think about how humble you have to be to have all this fame and glory and still sit back and appreciate the little moments and the little interactions like that and still long for it. How many of us have been on top of the world in our particular areas, whether it be prom king, prom queen, the all-star athlete in school, the debate team champ, the chess team champ, the star cheerleader, whatever, the hot shot at work, the superstar athlete, so many different things that maybe in your life you've been on top of the world in some area, and you don't appreciate the little things because you're so caught up in your own moment. So listening to other people who live the life that you would love to live, and seeing and hearing them reflect on the things that maybe you take for granted and you're nowhere near their level of stardom, can really bring you down to earth if you are receptive to it. And I really appreciate Kevin Hart for putting that on my radar. Just like I said last week, when there are people that you respect, admire, look up to, and you hear them say things that you need to hear, it just hits you different. Nothing against my boss, nothing against any of my former bosses, but, having a woman tell me these things, having a white man tell me these things, having like, a grandfather figure tell me these things is one thing, but seeing a guy that came from your city, again, your height, no hate on the little people, short people here, is in the comedy like you are, and so many different things, to hear them say it, it just fits a little bit different. That's no disrespect to anybody else. That's just saying that only certain people know how to hit that button for you. It's the same reason that maybe you want an athlete or an entertainer come to your kid's school and speak. Not that they don't admire their parents' rules and maxims, but that entertainer's lesson might stick a little better than that parent or that teacher. And that's no disrespect to the parent or teacher. That's just what it is. Hey, you got to use all your tools in the toolkit, right? You're not going to keep using the same tool for multiple different projects. So I thought that was interesting. So I appreciate that experience. The next area I wanted to talk about was sports, and how sports is so impactful for the Black community, and more in particular, how it brings everybody of every nation, creed, culture, color, height, regardless of disability, physical ability, brings everybody together. And I was really excited to have my next guest on, because sports in general can really bring so many people into a culture and can educate so many people, like I talked about a little bit earlier. It's crazy. I wanted to take the time to talk about some athletes who have done that very same thing for so many people. So we already talked about Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson, huge for so many people. Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, Jesse Owens, Serena Williams, Jerry Rice, Sugar Ray Robinson. There's so many, Bill Russell. There's so many people that you can go on and on and on. Ernie Davis, Carl Lewis, Leon Spinks, that you can just, Jackie Joyner, Curse. It's just so many people. Marion Jones, shout out to Marion Jones, Lisa Leslie. There's so many people in the African American community, Debbie Thomas, that you can take a look at and just draw inspiration from. And this next guest that I have talked about a few different areas about how sports has brought his family together and other people together, but I wanted to get his take on what it was like back in the 70s and 80s, being down south and later on in a predominantly white school, college in particular, and how sports impacted his journey to not only inspire him to write a book to give you a window into his world, into his life experience, but also how important it is for us to latch onto something so we can get to know each other a little bit better. My next guest, BoDean Sanders, does a phenomenal job of bringing us into his world. So without further ado, here's BoDean Sanders, the author of Race Against Race, My Journey of Diversity and Inclusion Through Sports.
Hey gang, welcome back. Another week, another episode, and this time, another guest, very special guest. This person has lived in the trenches when it comes to adversity and diversity, and I'm really excited, especially to kick off one of the first episodes of Black History Month, to welcome this next guest. We have BoDean Sanders, Wildcat Villanova alum, here with us today. Bo, how are you, sir?
I am doing wonderful during this nor'easter, Tim. I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to having a wonderful conversation with you.
Oh, it's going to be a good one. It's really going to be a good one. I can feel it in my bones. And you talked about the nor'easter. I'm sure a lot of this type of weather was not around in Jacksonville, Florida. And I think that's where I want to start the conversation at. Same way you do your book in a lot of ways. I wanted to start the conversation in Jacksonville, Florida. And before we get into some of the things you talk about in your book, I just wanted to talk to Bo as the person. One of the disadvantages that I have is a reference point. Being a young man, born in the 80s, I don't have a reference point from growing up in the South during certain racial tensions. So I would love to get your perspective on what it was like in Jacksonville from, the 70s and maybe early 80s.
Wow, that is a great question. So if you are a child of the 80s, that puts us at least 2 decades apart. So yeah, I'll answer that question this way. Based on my experience, and as I talk about in my book, so I grew up on the side of town where I, in my book, say majority Black neighborhood or community. Mm-hmm. And that didn't mean there weren't a small, very small pocket, and not even a pocket, individual families that were our white brothers and sisters. So literally across the street was a white family, and they were very nice, Southern hospitality, but we didn't know them. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by know them, we were neighbors, but we weren't neighborly. My mom taught us when we moved into our second house, and there was a white family across the street. She taught us, because in our old neighborhood, there were no white families in our old neighborhood. None.
Wow.
So we get to the new neighborhood, there's one white family across the street. My mom taught us when you see them and make eye contact, you throw up your hand and say hello. Even if they don't, you throw up your hands and say hello. And so that was kind of the culture and the atmosphere I grew up in, because I was just talking about this with my godbrother who lives in L.A. He lived next door to that white family. How that family were nice, Southern hospitality. You've heard that term before, right, Tim? Southern hospitality. Meaning people say hello, they're cordial, they're nice. When you make eye contact, you say hello, you greet someone. So he and I were talking about it. We never, ever, and we tried for 5 minutes on the phone. Yogi, do you remember ever seeing them barbecue outside with family and friends? He's like, nope. And I'm like, I don't either. Come on, let's try. Let's try to remember. Let's take a step back. Can we remember? None, ever. Never, ever. They came home. They went into their house. They came out of their house, got in their cars to go to work. And that's it. We didn't know their names, but we said hello. We greeted when we made eye contact, and that was it. I never stepped on their property, and they never came over to ours. So
wow.
That was my experience with specifically a white family across the street. So I hope that paints the picture of that first question.
No, I think it does, and it actually will play into something that we'll talk about a little bit later when it comes to diversity, because a lot of people don't get a chance to get outside of their culture and race, and that's true for white people, and that can also be true for Black people. So I'm sure it was a culture shock when you got to college, and don't worry, we'll get to that in a second, but one area that I wanted to focus on as well, you mentioned your mother, you mentioned your family, and I know your family was a huge part of your graduation. You said your race begins, in your book you talk about where your race began, and you said your race begins with your high school graduation. And there were a lot of your family there after you graduated. There was a ton of your family there, and that was a moment. And I remember you saying in the book that you didn't feel like you accomplished much at that moment. I'm sure looking back, the years and years of wisdom, you can look back and understand why that was so huge for your family. But in that moment, it didn't seem to be a big accomplishment, but it seemed to be huge for your mom. Can you talk a little bit why, you do mention it in the book, but can you talk a little bit about why it was so huge for your mother for you to graduate high school and, what that the type of impression that left on you?
Oh, wow. You have done your homework. Yes. The reason why it was huge for my mother is because my mom and dad were divorced when her kids, my mom had 4 kids with my dad while they were married. My dad was in the military for a little while, for at least 6 years. So my mom was the oldest of her siblings. And my grandmother grew up and was raised in Alabama, Mobile and Aunt Mo.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was born in Alabama. So being that my mom was the oldest, she was the first to have kids or grandkids, in relation to my grandmother. So we were the oldest grandkids and first group, lack of a better word, of grandkids for my grandmother. And the only sibling of my mother to graduate college out of 8. My mom was the oldest of 6 girls and 2 boys, and my uncles did not graduate college. They didn't go to college. So for my mom, knowing that she didn't attend college, knowing how important graduating high school and then at least getting into college at some point in time would be the next step of evolution for education. And it was important for her because I'm assuming she knew how difficult it was for my uncles. And I'm sure she knew how difficult it was for other men of color if they didn't get an education. So she understood the value of education from a lot of different perspectives. And so I know growing up in the house how important education was stressed. The reason why I described that in my book regarding your question about graduating high school at the Jacksonville Coliseum and how I described it was a big event. Families made it a big event. It wasn't just your mom and dad would show up. Your grandmother would show up. Some of your aunts and uncles, if they could, would show up. It was a big thing for graduation. And then if your son, if a male graduated from high school, it seemed like a bigger deal because back then in the 80s, and I graduated high school in 1983, that African American or men of color were dropping. It was probably the beginning stages of men dropping out of high school, not finishing on time, and then also definitely not going to college. So it was a pretty big family get-together outside the Coliseum the night we graduated from high school.
Well, that sounds like a huge event, and I'm sure being entrenched in that environment, that cultural environment where you have family, you have friends who look and sound like you, and going from that to Cheney, not too huge of a transition, but then going from Cheney to Villanova, of course, you talk about in your book it being a D1 program, so you wanted to be at Villanova over Cheney. You know, nothing against my Cheney listeners. nothing
Right.
against Cheney. You just, you wanted that competitive fire in you. I want to talk a little bit about, as we transition into the collegiate era of your life and your development as a young black man. I think oftentimes what gets overlooked in the black community is how important sports are and how important sports can be. I'd like you to talk a little bit about what the culture was like on the football field compared to in the locker room when it came to race. because a lot of these situations, you find yourself being really keyed into race. And then other areas, once you get on the football field, well, hey, if you ain't wearing blue and white, then you my enemy. So I just want you to kind of like key in on that area. Was the racial tension present within the locker room and on the football field? Or was that kind of something that was nobody cared? It was how fast you could run, how high could you jump?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me do a selfish plug for those who follow you and listen to you. The title of my book is Race Against Race, My Journey of Diversity and Inclusion Through Sport. And so I talk about, my memoir is a binary narrative. I talk about, and you hit on it exactly, I talk about two experiences. My experience regarding my evolution as a black athlete, and then I also talk about my evolution socially regarding race relations. And coming from my background, again, growing up in an all-black environment, black teachers, heavy black teacher environment, and then I start my career in college at Cheney University, the oldest HBCU in the country, founded in 1837 in Philadelphia before it moved out to the suburbs. And we can always talk about, where we were back in the day as a country to the reasons why it had to move from Philadelphia County out to Chester County, right? Mm-hmm. So when I arrived at Cheney, which was my only opportunity to get in college, it was the Cheney Division, at that point, a Division II school. And so I was happy to be there, loved the campus, fit right into the culture because of its history. And I honestly tell people, yes, there were probably a small percentage of our white brothers and sisters that attended Cheney, but I didn't recognize it. It never appeared to me. I never thought about it because it wasn't a big deal. I was there for a reason. I wanted to play football and I had to prove myself. I started at Cheney in January of 1984. I was there one semester because I was thrown a Hail Mary and I got into Cheney. And so I was there one semester, did very well on the football field as a walk-on, made the team for the fall, did okay regarding academics, where I was able to travel back home for the summer and complete my transfer request and was accepted. And that August, I was headed back to the Philadelphia area, but I was headed back to Villanova and not Cheney. So then I get to the locker room. Let's use the locker room. I go from being in a locker room with 99.9% brothers of color and what that culture entailed, right? Being comfortable, being used to it, to walking into a locker room the first day of meetings and meeting the new head coach and the new coaching staff. And there's one brother on the coaching staff and all white coaches. So what are the chances that one coach that's a brother, what are the chances of he being my specific position coach? Well, the odds probably not good. And you're right. They weren't. He wasn't. He was the linebackers coach.
Of course.
So I went from having black male role models, black male mentors, black male coaches from the time I started playing football, which was in junior high school, to getting to Villanova and having a white coach. And so that was a problem. Not for my coach. It was a problem for me. Because I never had a white coach before. Coming from the South, I come from an environment where if a black man got in your face and pulled you in by your face mask to his teaching style, to yell in your face and say, hey, listen, your job is to do this, that, and the third. That's what you were supposed to do on that play. I went from that to having a white coach pull me by the face mask, get in my face, yelling at me, and I never had it before. That was a problem. Because I grew up in the South where we were taught if a white man ever got in your face, it's go time.
Right.
So that was my problem. It wasn't the coach's problem. It was my problem. So I had to learn and adjust and evolve so I could look at my position coach and give him the same respect as I did my position coach in high school or in junior high school or at Cheney. So I had to adjust. And it took the help of my teammates, but specifically it took the help of one of my friends, Nate Booknight from Norristown. So we immediately gravitate to each other. We have conversations throughout the, couple of hours, and say, a couple of days later, we have our first meeting with the coaches. We walk into the locker room, and Tim, I tell you, as I described it in the book, I couldn't believe it. There were 5 people that looked like me, 4 people that looked like me in the locker room.
Wow. And now I just want to jump in really quickly. That's huge, and I really want my viewers and listeners to really bring them inside of that world for just a second. And I'm sure at length you talk about it in your book, but just bring them inside of your perspective, your goggles for just a second, and talk a little bit about on a day-to-day communicating with people who don't look and sound like you. It's a bit of a culture shock. Did that ever interrupt the chemistry on the football field? Did that ever interrupt the game planning, the practice, the water breaks, the celebrations, the defeats? How did that impact those moments for you?
Well, as I talk about in the book, and again, I don't mind falling on the sword because I'm old enough now to admit the truth. Early on in my life, I probably would not have admitted that I struggled. I'm at Villanova, D1, AA football. I've got to prove that I belong here. So I wasn't trying to prove I belong on campus as a black person. I was trying to prove that I belonged on campus as an athlete. Not even as a black athlete, just as an athlete. That was my thought. So as I met my teammates from that first day and got to know the group of defensive backs, because that's your immediate group, right? I met my group of defensive backs, and it was probably, 15 to 20 of us. It seemed like 40. But they were good guys. They weren't throwing slurs. They didn't have, as far as I was concerned, microaggressions throwing them at my way.
Were you surprised by that?
No, because I wasn't thinking about it. And maybe because I was too confident and too focused. There's a level of respect you earn and gain from your teammates being in the trenches. And so for me, your question is more valid with my classmates. How did I adjust and get along with my classmates? Because that's a different topic, right? That's a different angle. Teammates, fine. So adjusting to my classmates, well, being super friendly, having that Southern hospitality, smiling, making eye contact, saying hello. That was a little different for my classmates who were mostly from the East Coast.
Sure.
Right?
Some of them are allergic to smiling.
Oh, they would say, "Why is he smiling at me? Why did he say hello to me? Who is this? Why does he want to talk to me?" Right? So I had to get used to them not being generally, I'm just speaking generally, accepting to a guy who was walking around with a smile on his face, shoulders back, chest puffed out, head up, with confidence. And it took some time to getting used to. But again, maybe it took me longer because I wasn't focused on it all the time when I first walked on campus. Now, once I made the team, went through my ups and downs, and then by the time I got to my senior year of having all my hardships and successes, I was able to graduate with a positive outcome. But that's getting too far in advance.
Of course. Well, I think honestly, you've given us a lot to sit down and digest. And one key takeaway that me personally that I like to take away is whether you're a kid growing up in the 70s or 80s, whether you're a kid growing up in the 90s, or whether you're even a kid growing up now, there's a lot of diversity that you have to deal with. And one thing that I can really appreciate, key takeaway from your book, that I feel like most people who are not people of color won't be able to recognize and relate to is navigation is a key survival technique for people of color and specifically black people. We have to learn how to adapt, evolve, and adjust. And it's quite literally a matter of life and death. So I do thoroughly appreciate that perspective that you're able to bring to your book. Again, the book is called Race Against Race, My Journey of Diversity and Inclusion Through Sports by Mr. BoDean Sanders, Villanova alum. BoDean, thank you so much for today. Where can people find your book? Where can people find out more about you?
I hope your listeners do take the opportunity to go to my website, which is bo-dean, D-E-A-N, Sanders, SANDERS.com, all one word, bo-deansanders.com. Go to my website. All the information they need is right there. You can find any of your online retailers, your favorite retailers, on my website, to pick up the book. So it's the beginning. I like to tell people, if you're going to have the race conversation, my approach is the low-hanging fruit approach, Tim. You start with building a relationship first before you work your way to the uncomfortable conversations. And I believe me, I don't want to beat up or disagree with folks who say, "Oh no, we need to have the uncomfortable conversation first." My approach is you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. If you want to have the conversation about race relations and move it and progressively move it and evolve in the right direction, you got to start with building at least the beginnings of a relationship. You shake hands, you introduce yourself, you get to know each other, you find out what you have in common, and then you begin to move forward, which is a total different approach than starting off having the uncomfortable conversation. So that's what I hope people, one of the things, because there are a lot of things. There's 7 chapters, 42 topics. There's more than enough in my memoir where someone can say, I definitely learned something. I'm going to apply this from that point forward and use it as an opportunity to begin to build relationships. And I mean my black brothers and sisters and my white brothers and sisters. We all have room to grow.
Wow, that's beautiful. And like you said, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. I think that's a great approach. Bo, thanks again. I really appreciate the time. I'm really excited for our listeners and viewers to hear the interview played back on the show. And I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you sometime soon.
Anytime, Tim. Just let me know. I'll be there for you.
Wow, just simply great. The interview went way, way long. There was one of those things where, it was really tough to try to pick the best parts of the interview to isolate, but it was a very fulfilling experience to be able to live through BoDean, and I had a chance to read a good chunk of his book, and it's very, very interesting. I encourage everyone who, especially younger men and women who are into sports, they're student athletes, whether it be track, football, gymnastics, whatever the case may be. I encourage you to listen to his story, read his book, to see what it was like and see some of the similarities that are still here to this day. And maybe some of BoDean's life experiences can help you with what you are about to experience or what you are currently experiencing to this day. The last thing I want to talk about, y'all, is my bike. My bike came. So if you are in the northeast area of the country, we just got hit with a lot of snow. So on one end, I'm glad my bike came. But on another end, I can't ride it right away. For those of you who don't know, I do not know how to ride a bike. So I'm really excited to teach myself and to get some exercise because getting a little gut, I don't like that. And I've always wanted to learn how to ride a bike, so I just never have. So I'm going to live through some of Kevin Hart's lessons and try to be as disciplined as I can be when it comes to this. I'm gonna put the bike together. I'm gonna take some pictures, maybe even post some videos online. So go and check those out once I post those. And if you aren't already following me, please do. So that way you can get additional insight surrounding that. That's all I have, everybody. I'm pretty much all set for the week, hoping that everything can go according to plan, especially with the bike. But tell me about your week throughout the week. I'll be checking in on all of you online via social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and holla at me. Holla at your boy. Until the next time, everybody, as always, I'll keep talking if you listen. Take care.